You know, there's nothing I love more than a good quality factory tour. I've done loads of factory tours, mostly not in the UK, but this one is in the UK. This is the plant in Cowley, outside Oxford, that produces the Mini E, which I'm going to be driving later on, which is great. I'm not saying I'm not looking forward to that, but going around the factory is brilliant. So this is the Mini E, and this is fully charged. So here I am in the Mini E, and I love this. This is my favourite thing, and you shouldn't do this if you're a professional car reviewer. You should just know how things work, but I genuinely don't. I know I've got the keys. You don't have to put the keys in anything, and I'm going to go with the guess of foot on brake. This, you've got to turn it on, which is fair, and there is a button, there, a yellow button that says start. Okay, so it makes lots of noises. It's got a sat nav, which is good. I didn't know how to head up. It's got a head-up display. Ooh, very smooth takeoff. Very, very smooth. It's just an amazing process. The amount of components in the most simple, basic car are mind-boggling. There's many, many kilometres of wire that's put into it, even in the Mini, even in the standard Mini, not the electric one. Just mind-boggling. I mean, you're talking like 70 kilometres of wires. Just loads of connectors, because when you turn things on in the car, there's got to be a wire that joins it to something else. And that's something we never think about as drivers. But what's happening behind me here, very shortly, there's a battery pack that's will be lifted into the car and bolted on. And it's all done basically with robots, and it's all automatic. The electric motor and drivetrain has been put in one stop that way. And now we'll see, it's ready in position, so I would imagine it's going to be one of the next cars. We're waiting specially to see the battery marrying the car. It's very exciting. Right, I am going to try charging the car, so I really, really don't need to charge it, but I just thought I'd give it a go. But I'm at an insta-volt charge point. I'm reversing into it extremely badly. I just want you to know that. I've done that as badly as it's possible to do. I will now straighten up. There we go, now I've got it beautifully. That's beautifully parked. Only a professional could park that well. That does solve that one, there we go. So now, how does this go? Oh, nice, like that. That comes out, that goes in there. Because it's at 90%, so it really doesn't need it. So my charging experience, very simple, very straightforward, easy, it's not complicated. CCS charging, I added 3% to the battery, so not entirely necessary charging experience. I just want to test it out. So it doesn't charge as quickly as some of the latest electric cars do, you know, which are charging at 100, 150, 250 in the case of the Tesla Model 3. But you only get that charge if you are, you know, the batteries are very, very empty. There's no way I'd get that in this car now when it's nearly full. So it was just to really have an experience of that. I mean, I think the problem is with a car like this, and I actually don't think this is an important point. I don't think it's actually a problem with this car. I think this car is extremely drivable, extremely useful, and for 99%, so that's most car journeys, it's ultra adequate. It's got about, let's say, 130 miles realistic range. which is, by the standards of a lot of other vehicles that are coming out that are 200, 250, some 300, it's such a bad selling point. But in actual fact, 120 miles is incredibly useful for most of the time, because people don't do that long. So if you have somewhere, for instance, off the road to park this vehicle, and you charge it at night at your house, you never, there's going to be one or two times, every 6 months when you need to stop and charge it on a public charger en route somewhere. But most of the time, you wouldn't even dream of doing that, and it's really, really useful. But people are going to think that they need the maximum amount of range ever. So that, I think, is going to be a tough sell for. Now, 2 or 3, 5 years ago, people would have been really impressed with 120 miles range. But now it's kind of, guys, come on. But the good thing is, the battery is heated and cooled, which means that will extend its life, as we now know, enormously. This battery is going to outlast the car. It's absolutely, there's no argument about that. This is my gripe. You could put, in a car this size, this well built, made by BMW, beautiful engineering, you could put a 50 or a 60 kilowatt hour battery in, giving it 200 plus miles range, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. And they've had to squiddle it in and compromise it, make a T-shaped, battery pack that fits in the existing vehicle. Just, it grates my EV knuckles. I just wish, that's the problem with it. It just, you want to be able to argue, and people go, 120 mile range isn't enough. And you go, well, all right, get the one that's got the 400 mile range then and shut up. Or I keep wanting to moan about it and keep wanting to criticise it. It is such a nice car to drive. I can't help reflecting on that. And it just is really good. It drives really, really well. Okay, I haven't tried this yet. I'm going to put it on sport. I don't know how much difference that's going to make. The dash goes red and then throbs green. So, okay, I'm going to admit it. I'm not winded by the brutal acceleration once it's in sport. Is it a bit more? It's a bit more responsive in the lower speeds. But I would imagine from a standing start, it's pretty impressive. Okay, let's just experience that a bit more. Okay, yeah, okay, I take it back. When you put it in sport, it's got some oomph. It's got some measurable aggression. I think there is a market for this. I think they've had something like 15,000 orders, which is great, and they'll make them, and people will get used to them and drive it. It's just, if I was going to buy an electric car built by BMW at the moment, I would buy the i3. So much better as an electric car. Not necessarily a better car. I think this one is beautifully built, drives really well. That's not my argument. It's just that the latest i3s it'll go further on a charge. It's built as an electric car. Everything about it is to maximise the fuel efficiency. So I thought this was worth mentioning, even though it's not directly to do with the Mini E, it's to do with charging electric cars. We're at a fairly remote location here. It doesn't have the power to charge multiple cars at one time. So Grid to Go are brought in by BMW to supply the power. So these battery packs charge off the grid connection slowly and overnight or whatever, or over a couple of days before they need it. And then they can charge 12 cars at the same time off this system, which is really brilliant. So it's a method of using second life vehicle batteries. A lot of the batteries in these packs come from BMW i3s. That first generation of batteries is now starting to find its role as second life batteries. They're not going to be thrown away. We know that. It's worth reiterating. They're going to be used again and again. But that's a really good use for those kind of, a way of managing charging in a remote place. I wish we'd known about it a couple of years ago when we started doing Fully Charged Live. It would have been really useful. If I had to sum this car up in 2 words, I would say extremely adequate. That would be my thing, because there's some really good aspects to it. But there's a lot of drawbacks. I guess range being the main one. kind of 150 mile range is very, very usable. You know, which when you see a car and it says it's got 175 miles range, it will do 150. When you get told it does 150, which is probably what they say about this, it actually does about 125. So it is a shame, because it's a great little car. I mean, you know, why can't I love it? I really want to. I was impressed with how they make it. I was impressed with the engineers I met who worked on it. I mean, they've done a brilliant job. But everything about it is kind of built to fit within a petrol environment, and that kind of annoys me. They've built the motor and the motor control system and the battery control system into a big block, which replaces the big block of the petrol engine. And you go, well, you could have built that in some other way and then had storage in the front. There's not a lot of storage in this car. So they've kind of built it around, they've built it with a petrol car consciousness. That is what annoys me. I know that if you want the Mini Union Jack brake lights, which this vehicle has, I believe, that's an extra 400 quid to be a bit Brexity. I think it's quite a cool looking image. I quite like the fact that you get brake lights that look like the Union Jack cut in half. So you do get a bit of engine noise. That's my favourite sound. That's nice. Actually, I now remember that is a very similar sound to the i3, which is not surprising because it's the same motor. The Hyundai Kona, when you're going fast and you take your foot off, it tells you how many points of a mile you're adding to the range. It's very clear. You don't have to do anything clever to make it do that. This tells you very, very little. It's very, very simple. So I know you've got this speed in the middle. You've got your range, potential range. But when you take your foot off, so I'm going to accelerate now, and then I've got regen, but it's not telling me anything else. It's just saying I've got regen. So it's not telling me maybe a percentage or how many kilowatt hours I might be putting in or how many kilowatts it is. Do you need to know that as a driver? Probably not. Do you need to know it as an electric vehicle obsessive? Definitely. Adaptive cruise control is really common across loads of vehicles. It's not that complicated now. It was incredibly flash when it first came out. And it really is helpful. And this doesn't have it, unless I'm doing something wrong. So I will find out whether this has genuinely adapt. But at the moment, my experience of it is that it doesn't have that. So I've actually reassessed my opinion of this car. I just think it looks fantastic. Now, we've stopped here for a moment at the Westmill Wind Farm, which is a cooperative wind farm owned by a lot of people in Swindon, invested in this. It's producing an enormous amount of electricity. The profits from the wind farm go back into the community around Swindon, which is brilliant. And obviously, it's generating electricity, so it's incredibly relevant to this car. But I had some thoughts last night about brands, because they were talking a lot in their presentations about the Mini brand and how iconic the Mini brand is. And certainly it's been an amazing car. It's sold millions around the world. They've made millions of this model of the Mini, and it is an iconic brand. And I was thinking, I don't like brands. I don't buy into brands. I'm not a brand. I don't have any sort of allegiance to brands. And then I realised I had 4 Volkswagen Golfs in a row, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I had 3 Land Rover Defenders in a row, 1, 2, 3, and now I've had 2 Teslas in a row, so I am definitely very brand conscious. So now I have to accept there will be people who love Minis who will love this car. I think this is the best Mini they've ever made. It's brilliant. I love driving it. I wish it had a little bit more range, not like loads, like 20 or 30 miles more. If it did 150 miles an hour charge, it would be a no-brainer. I wouldn't argue about it. So as you can possibly tell, it is quite chilly here. We don't want to spend all day here. It's very nice and warm in the car. I can't wait to get back in it. We're going to drive it back to the Cowley plant now. Please do subscribe to Fully Charged. Please do have a look at the Patreon link beneath this video, because that really helps us make these shows. And as always, if you have been from Westmill Wind Farm outside Swindon, thank you for watching.